Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you for joining me for this week's edition of the SMIE Consulting Midweek Roundup. It's Wednesday, August 6th, 2025, and today we're going to be answering three questions we've been hearing from international educators over the last 7 days. And as we do each week on the Roundup, we take our questions that we ask on Wednesdays from our newsletter that comes out on Mondays. And that Monday morning newsletter is accessible two different ways. You can do that by subscribing on our website, and I'll be dropping the link to our website in the chat at smieconsulting.org/subscribe. You can scroll down to the subscribe section and complete that quick online form to receive the email version of the newsletter in your inbox Monday morning at about 9 a.m. Eastern. Alternately, if you prefer to get your international ed news via LinkedIn, you can get that through LinkedIn as well. On that same website, you can get a link to the LinkedIn main page for the newsletter. And when you have that, you'll be able to get that about a half hour earlier in your notifications on LinkedIn. So I'm very happy to report that we're over 2,600 subscribers on the newsletter, and that number keeps ratcheting up each week. Very happy and proud that so many international educators are making use of our newsletter each week as part of their international edification. So what we do each week is in the newsletter, we take, there's 3 or 4 different sections that you can pay attention to. First of which is a social media section. And social media section has grown to include everything from how social media is being used in international education, key reports, analyzing digital tools, AI, webinars, reports, any online blogs, those kind of things that we might be able to share with our audience and help them better get a grip on what's going on the digital side of things in international education circles. So that's the social media section. Then we have a section called big U.S. news, and that section includes latest executive orders, acts of Congress, new bills proposed, new court cases that have come up that are challenging particular executive orders or other things that the current administration has done. So it does cover quite a broad range of things. We have a Solution Central, which takes a look at the kind of key ideas that some folks are blogging about or success stories that are being profiled as ways that we can be doing a better job internationally with our campuses. And then there's a global roundup, and the global roundup is covers basically what's happening in the rest of the world with other major destinations for international students, and to see how different countries are grappling with sometimes very similar issues, sometimes very different issues, and achieving some quite outstanding results in some ways, but not without their own challenges. So what we do is we take those news stories where we give you our hot takes in the newsletter on Mondays, and we find some common themes developing around clusters of news stories, and then we come up with our 3 questions each week where we go more next level in analysis of how these questions can be answered and how we might be adjusting our, in light of changes in policy and changes on strategy, how we might be adjusting what we do on our own campuses. Now, the first question this week that we're covering is one that's on everybody's minds, with just a few short days till most colleges start their new academic years. I know we start our academic year on August 26th at the University of Akron, where I work. And then we're eagerly anticipating our new arrivals who have gone through probably the most chaotic 7 months of a new presidential administration in terms of policy change and how that impacts how they do what they do, how they are able to come to the United States, and the hoops that they're increasingly being asked to jump through in order to come. So the question is, what does the fall look like for most U.S. colleges? And there are a few resources that we'll be sharing, most of which are commentaries on the NAFSA report that was released this past week. And the NAFSA report certainly was not pleasant reading. not unexpected reading, frankly, for most of us, where they announced what recent surveys have revealed as a potential impact of all the government policy changes in the last 7 months, and how that might impact fall enrollments here in the United States. So there's 3 articles. There's the NAFSA piece where they outline their statements and the findings of the report, columned by Karen Fisher in her Latitudes newsletter, and then an ISIF Monitor review of the entire impact of that. Now, the bottom line is, U.S. is looking at, with an expected drop of just a 15% drop in overall enrollment, what that looks like, and the reality, more significant reality of a 30 to 40% drop in new international students. So that's what the effect would be, a 30 to 40% decline in new international students. And I would say we're about in line with that, probably on the high side at Akron in terms of what we're expecting, probably close to a 40% drop from last fall. When the dust settles from the fall enrollments, that could mean an overall 15% drop in enrollments nationwide of all levels and post-secondary. So that 15% drop in enrollment is going to lead to $7 billion in lost revenue to the country, mostly for the universities and the communities that they're impacting, and more than 60,000 lost jobs. Now, there are obviously have already been universities that have laid off staff. There are service providers that work with the U.S. higher ed community that are laying off staff, and not just because of the U.S., but we've seen drops in the U.K., in Canada, and Australia, all shooting themselves in the foot with self-inflicted wounds, and that's what we've done in the U.S. Government policy changes based on faulty data, which we'll talk about in our second question, based on illogical assessments of what needed to be vetted and what didn't, based on scaremongering, for lack of a better term, in terms of their policy approaches on certain things, and just an overall negative view of studying in the United States. So that $7 billion lost revenue may or may not register, and we've just seen a new Karen Fisher's newsletter this week talks about why even the economic arguments for international education are falling on deaf ears with this administration. So that might not speak volumes for you or for the government, but will 60,000 fewer jobs make a difference? And that certainly has weight when you consider the Bureau of Labor Statistics director was just fired because they reconfigured or readjusted down the new employment or jobs creation for May and June as a result of some different data that was being looked at. So jobs apparently matter. So maybe that will ring true with the administration. Wouldn't hold my breath, but there is certainly, we've heard what happened at Valencia College, where basically everyone involved in international in any way was let go en masse. We've seen universities across the board decide not to fill positions or lay off key international enrollment folks or marketing folks. So it's happening. It's already started to happen even before the fall has hit. So these jobs are going to come apart, and job losses will grow in the coming months. That's pretty clear. Depending on how severe the drops are expected in your college or university, you may already have some folks nervous about their futures. So the NAFSA report is, like I said, not very significant. What NAFSA has done is they have done a projected losses by state, so you can find out what your state potentially could be losing in terms of revenue. And for some, California is slated to lose $1 billion, over $1 billion in revenue as a result of this. Other states like Texas is about 388 million. You see Florida is coming in at 243 million. So California is off the charts, and then followed up by New York, which is about $988 million losses. Where I am in Ohio, we're looking at $200 million losses in revenue to the state. So will that matter? We'll see. Will that resonate? Will that change direction by the administration? Doubtful. But what we're seeing now is four different things. The NAFSA report identifies four different things that are potentially slowing down and leading to the inevitable decline we're going to see in the next few weeks. First, the visa interview suspension. We've talked about that many times here on the Roundup between May 27th and June 18th, basically 3-4 weeks, where no interviews happened. And as a result, this is peak visa season between May and August. Between those 3 months, 70,000, May, June, July, and August. Between those 4 months, 70% of international students go for their visa appointments each year. And for almost a month of that time, they were unable to do so. That has led to limited appointment availability. That's the second reason they flag. That particularly in consulates in India, China, Nigeria, Japan, those have reported limited or no appointments available in time for fall enrollment. And then downward visa trends, the visa issuances, visa rejection rates have gone up, visa approval rates have gone down 12% from January to April, down 22% in May compared to May 24. No June 25 data yet, but visa issuance rate for June is expected to be 80 to 90% down as a result of the 3 weeks basically in June when no visas were awarded. And then the visa bans to 19 countries as of June 4th, and another 36 on the list potentially. Again, PR nightmare for the U.S. as a destination, particularly for those students in those countries. We know about Iran, Myanmar, and as some of the top countries. Iran by far the largest single country on that list in terms of a sender to the United States. Not all of those are direct from Iran because Iranian students and the Iranian diaspora is fairly significant. And they have to go for visa appointments in Turkey, in Azerbaijan, in the UAE. So there's a lot of countries that have been impacted, 19 of which are still on a travel ban list. So those are automatically going to lead to declines in students able to come from those countries. And again, Iran being the most significant driver of that. So that's why we're looking out for a very significantly poor fall term. Poor, probably bordering very close to what we saw during the pandemic. And Karen Fisher's newsletter last week, Latitudes, does take a look at that. It's roughly close to what the border shutdowns that halted travel in fall of 2020, leading up to that fall of 2020 enrollment period, led to significant drops. So we'll see what that looks like for this fall. So all the indicators are pointing to a very poor fall term. Fall intake for U.S. institutions up to 30 to 40%. The impact on ISEF Monitor features the same numbers, obviously, that are shared in the articles in Karen Fisher's column. The quotes from Fanta, the executive director and CEO of NAFSA, are very telling. She says the immediate economic losses projected here are just the tip of the iceberg. International students drive innovation, advance America's global competitiveness, and create research and academic opportunities in our local colleges that will benefit our country for generations. For the U.S. to succeed in the global economy, we must keep our doors open to students from around the world. So the ISEF Monitor piece also looks at those four reasons that have led to the projected declines and features some other commentary. So all in all, we are looking at a dire fall intake. But there are smaller colleges, surprisingly, that you probably don't know about, that are looking at potentially small increases. That if they have small intakes, they might have been looking at going from 24 to 37 or something like that. Maybe their focus has not been on some of those key markets and are in other areas where they haven't been as impacted by lack of appointments, aren't on travel ban lists. If they focused on Latin America, for example, or Europe, they're probably in a better position. Though sentiment in Europe isn't too positive towards the United States anyway, at least amongst student populations, because they don't like Trump, for example. So that certainly is a real sad situation for most of us in international education, and a situation that is down entirely to the tone of this administration, the executive orders that they've implemented, the misguided decisions that have been made, the reasoning used for some of the decisions that have been made, whether it was the SEVIS terminations of March and April that led to over 4,000, 5,000 students' records being terminated, even though that's a small microcosm of the overall international student population in the United States, and the greater majority of those, 95% plus, were reinstated with because there was no cause for them to have their records terminated, and certainly not for immigration-related offenses, and certainly not for national security reasons that they made out to be the case. So the logic that was used for those SEVIS terminations was using AI to search or compare the SEVIS list to all law enforcement databases for any interactions, not convictions, not arrests, not just, it could be a ticket. An interaction with law enforcement agencies were the reason for that 4,400, 4,500, 5,000 students getting their SEVIS records terminated. Faulty. They were losing in court and they had to backtrack and they reinstated. So clearly a wrong decision. You can go down the line and say how wrong-headed most of these decisions are. But let's look, case in point, on the 19-country travel ban. And the question is the 19-country travel ban policy based on faulty data? And if you remember at the time, that data that was the data that was used to justify why the specific 19 countries were targeted for immediate red, orange, yellow bans for various visa statuses. We know that the red and the orange countries, as far as international students go, were complete bans because they affected students, red countries, international students that were in orange countries, banned, can't come unless they already had a visa. The next list of 36 are also countries that could be facing that. I don't know if they will. We've talked about that before here too, because instead of banning them, it looks like they've had their visa times, approved visa times and uses reduced to single entry 3-month visas for all of those 26 other countries, or 36 other countries. 36 other countries. And the security protocols and those type of things are also used as part of the justifications, particularly in the first Trump administration. And again, with this 19, that was also one of the things that was mentioned. But the data, the data that was used was claimed to be the foundation for why these 19 countries were now banned in those categories, was based on visa overstay rates, high visa overstay rates, and whatever that high number was, that was the phrasing that was used to justify. There's oddly enough, from the Times of India, there was an article this past week that used a report from DHS, again, DHS, who is responsible for the SEVIS terminations and how those were figured out. That is an annual overstay report that's published annually. It was cited as justification for the travel ban that was issued on June 4th, excuse me. And basically what the overstay figures include is inaccurate, and outdated records. And that is what a visa overstay actually means is when non-immigrant visas holders are coming into the country, their visas have a date on them, and those are recorded by Department of State. They're entered into SEVIS and other databases that track who's legally allowed to stay here. What we all know in international ed circles is that international students have this DS as part of their record when they enter the United States. That is duration of status. Duration of status is a status that goes beyond their the terms of their visa. The visa might be issued for 3 years, it might be issued for 1 year, it might be issued for 3 months. The visa expiration date doesn't mean they can't continue to be a student. A student can come here as a first-year student for an undergraduate degree and only have a visa that's good for 6 months. But if they don't go home, in the 4 years of their undergraduate program, and have maintained their status throughout their time in the United States, they are considered in status and not a visa overstay. Technically, because they haven't left the country. The visa is only important ever for coming into the country when you are an international student. For when you're in other visa categories, unless you extend or do other things, change your visa status, those types of things, those can get caught up in this data that is claimed for the 19 travel ban countries. So what for students that we're most particularly concerned about is the data that is being used is for our upper bound estimates of individuals whose departures could not be verified. And that means students could potentially have stayed in the country but have maintained their status. They could still end up on this list. Also, you would be looking at international students from these countries, like Iranians, for example. They don't go home. They're going to stay. They're going to get on, hopefully, H-1Bs. They're going to apply for asylum. They're going to do other things. But once they change their status and aren't students anymore, yet they haven't left the country, they are showing up on these reports as visa overstays. That's why many of these countries got included on travel ban list, is because, and as it impacts students, because of the different nature of international student status, when it's DS, not just the date that's stamped on their visa. And that's we saw this recently in Colorado, a Brazilian student who had an expired visa was arrested by ICE or by state patrol, and then has been state border patrol or state highway patrol, and was transferred to ICE custody because she had an expired visa. She may well have had an expired visa. Doesn't mean she was not invalid student status, and those are two different things. So how decisions are being made, particularly amongst law enforcement, that may not have the complete picture, may not be aware of all the different rules that impact a student versus that are different from other visa categories, that is a real challenge. And this Times of India report does point out very clearly what the problems are and how we have really missed the boat and are making faulty decisions based on bad data, improper AI usage, generative AI usage, when we go back to the CBIS terminations report, or even the extreme vetting that Senator Rubio promised for Chinese students never really materialized, and once they get mentioned as being part of the new trade deal with China, then suddenly that drops off the radar, and that's less of an issue. Yet the administration really doesn't take back, other than the reinstatement piece for those terminations. They don't really take back things that they do that are clearly wrong and admit their fault. That's just not their style, and it would have knock-on impacts itself. But the serious recognition or lack of recognition of the errors that have been made is really startling, but frankly not surprising given everything else that this administration has done. So to be sure, this visa travel ban, or the travel ban list for 19 countries, is certainly not going to be the last time we have something that this administration does that is wrong-headed, that is based on faulty information, and is just plain a disaster for our profession. But higher ed has a huge target, not just international ed. Higher ed has a huge target on its back that this administration has made very clear is something that he believes, the administration believes, is in dire need of reform. And until he's satisfied, and you've seen the Ivy League schools like Columbia, and a couple of the other universities, Chicago's going to be struck a deal as well. Other ones are likely prestigious institutions. The lead institutions are being asked for data. They're going to be, but the universities are being targeted for their DEI policies, for their lax enforcement on anti-Semitism policies on campus, or allowance of pro-Hamas groups to flourish on their campuses. All of that, but. It does unfortunately paint a broad brush across higher ed that Trump likes to make examples of a few high-profile folks or institutions in the case of higher ed, and turn the screws and make them suffer. And as a result, it impacts all of us, because there's a level of suspicion now that his rhetoric has created, his actions have created amongst the population as a whole, certainly amongst like-minded politicians, not just at the national level, but in state and local levels, also who feed into his philosophy, are likewise impacted. So there's a lot more that's coming, I'm sure, and it's not a very pretty picture that we're painting right now. The recognition and the ability to be able to have a reasonable argument with another person on these things is something that we always need to keep in mind, that what that looks like, and be able to argue our case forcefully, and to be able to defend what we do, why we do what we do, and our students more particularly. And that's, in the end, that's what we are all really truly motivated by, is that we're here to make sure our students have the best possible experience for their education experience in the United States. So let's move on to our final question of the day, and that is, why are Asian tigers rising recently? And when we say Asian tigers, these are the Asian, particularly East and Southeast Asian nations that have become not only economic powers, but are becoming increasingly international education powers in the world. What's really driving them forward? And we've talked about it a bit in the past, but we've got some good examples of this, and it's actually translating into jumps in interest and student flows. There's a Keystone report that shares Asian tiger destinations see a 19% jump in student interest, looking specifically at Hong Kong, where there's been 125% increase in search for study in Hong Kong in June compared to March. Singapore is seen as 33% increase in student study searches, as well as South Korea has now entered the top 10 study destinations for the first time in Keystone's report. So some really fascinating data there in those Asian tigers, and beyond Hong Kong, beyond Singapore, and Taiwan also up 6%, and South Korea. So other than that, what's some of the other data that we're seeing? We're seeing in Malaysia. Obviously, Malaysia used to send 10, 20,000 students to the United States in their peak in the 90s, usually coming from community college partnerships with U.S. universities, coming for undergraduate studies to complete bachelor's degree programs. Those numbers have tailed off recently, but in recent years, Malaysia is now also looking to become a destination, a regional study hub for international education, much like the Emirates or Qatar in the Persian Gulf have become hubs for international education as well. You now see places beyond Hong Kong, beyond Singapore, Malaysia, Indonesia also looking to become major study destinations for international students, not just sending them abroad, sending their own abroad. And Malaysia has seen a huge spike in the number of Chinese students studying in their country because of the cultural and language similarities. You see Chinese students are now 38.4% of all international students enrolled in Malaysia's public and private higher education. That's a five-fold increase over the last 5 years. So there's an article shared in fulcrum.sg from Singapore, says three major shifts in immigration stance and traditional study destination countries, the big four, as we've talked about many times, geopolitical tensions, and worsening bilateral relations between China and some traditional study destinations, and three, country-specific conditions in Malaysia and China. Importantly, these factors do not operate in silos. It is their concurrent existence that facilitate the current trend. So that's from this article. So there's been significant increases from Chinese to Malaysia, also from Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Pakistan. So another rising Asian tiger as a study destination. And then one study destination that has seen their numbers grow significantly, they have South Korea has a goal of, I think it's 300,000 international students by the end of the century. And they have been making some good progress. We've talked about them here as one of the real positive shining lights of examples of what a unified government strategy, economic strategy, that melds and combines with a coherent international education strategy that promotes the nation as a destination for prospective students to come in, and particularly students in certain fields that have been identified as skills shortages in the coming years, and in jobs and careers that the country needs that aren't being filled by domestic populations. You see universities and working with industry to facilitate the enrollment and oftentimes scholarships for these students in these high demand fields that there isn't domestic supply to fill. And then also the pathways created by the government to facilitate a smoother transition from school to work. It's great when those policies are aligned, and we wish we had something like that in the United States. We're so many years away from that, and the sheer decentralized nature of our country and the breadth of our country really make that dream impossible. We just hope for some Congress people to get the message, or leadership in the White House to understand this is a real benefit for the U.S. as a country if we bring the best and brightest from afar to the U.S. to work and or study first and then work in key areas. That would make sense, you would think, based on our track record with entrepreneurship and startups and tech industries that are 40% founded by either international students or first-generation immigrants. So we don't do that here in the U.S., but other countries are doing that. This last country I mentioned, South Korea, does have a little bit of a twist, and we might be seeing similar things happening in Taiwan and Japan that are also following similar policies of aligning international education and economic policies and work, making pathways clear. Korea, Japan tend to be very siloed cultures. Very distinct, very different, and very insular in a lot of ways in terms of those that live in that country. Acceptance of those from other countries and willingness to allow them to do their own thing, whether it's religion or food or whatever it might be, it's perhaps customs not as open necessarily to assimilating those who don't look like them, who aren't Korean or aren't Japanese, into society. Article that came out that we've just dropped in the chat from Korea Times asked these very similar questions about, well, are non-Korean internationals that are looking to stay, are they feeling like they're really a part or welcomed, and feel like they are needed in the country. So the article goes on to really examine that in detail. So I won't have time to go into all of that today, but certainly worth taking a look at to understand why this might become an issue for countries like Korea, Japan, others in East Asia that tend to be more monolithic culturally, and how easy it will be for outsiders to adapt and adjust to life in that country. So that's all we have for you this week on the Roundup. Thanks again for joining with us for this conversation, and appreciate you being a part of what we discuss each week here, whether you're watching live on YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, or on repeat on those platforms, or listening to the audio-only version. Thank you for taking the time to include SMIE Consulting in your international edification each week. So until next week, do wish you the very best. Cheers.